Peace and blessings to all the brothers and sisters out there scattered abroad. I'm Priest Dunn, coming from the House of Wisdom, joined today with my two readers, Priest Azariah to my left and Priest Rosh to my right. We are joining you today, coming live at the start of the Feast of Tabernacles. We just started the 15th day of the 7th month, ending the Sabbath that was on the 14th day and coming into the Holy Convocation, the next Sabbath, this double Sabbath that starts the Feast of Tabernacles. And most High willing, we'll be here in Atlanta the whole week, plus the extra day, the great day on the 8th day, giving up the oblations and the sacrifice to the Most High as He commanded us to do. This is indeed a commandment, a true commandment, as we went through in many classes. So as we start this Feast of Tabernacles, there's something we all need to be critically aware of. Now, there's several things actually that we need to be critically aware of, but in this class today, we're going to touch on something particular. Looking at the main concept that circles around the Feast of Tabernacles. We're not going to get into whether you stay in a tent or anything like that, but unfortunately, Tabernacles has become that for many of our brothers and sisters, is that they just go out in a tent and they're going to fill up on junk food and stuff and eat and fill their bellies inside a tent and think they're doing Tabernacles. And they leave and think they did something great. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We're completely missing the purpose of Tabernacles. Now, this class, once again, is not going into, do we go into a tent or do we stay at home or whatever we do. This is looking at the core concept as to why the Most High told us to do this feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. Before we get into it, Priest Rosh, if you'll read Leviticus 23, and start at verse 33, where the Most High commanded Moses to keep this feast. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 33.
And the Most High spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days.
All right, so that's where we are currently right now. We're not doing our days based on our local time here in Atlanta. You can't have us starting Tabernacles at one time and then brothers in California starting at another time, then some of the brothers we have over in Kenya starting at another time. You can't have that. We're all localized and centralized by doing things based on the time in Jerusalem. That's the place where the Most High most recently placed His name. He didn't place His name in Atlanta or New York or Nairobi or wherever. He placed it in Jerusalem. So we base our days based on that place where the Most High placed His name. That is where we start our days, from Jerusalem. So the evening has just started in Jerusalem about this time, about 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Therefore, we have now crossed over into the first day of the week, so-called Sunday, which is the 15th day of the 7th month. This is where we are, and we are starting this Feast of Tabernacles. Continue on.
Verse 35. On the first day shall be an holy convocation. It shall do no servile work therein.
All right, so the first day of this feast and also the last day are holy convocations. These are Sabbaths where you rest from your own work and get busy in the work of the Most High. Read on.
7 days ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High.
All right, so this is also part of the Feast of Tabernacles, is that you don't just eat to fill your belly. When you have these feasts, the reason it's a feast is because you're offering so many sacrifices to the Most High, and everybody gets a portion, gets to eat from it. That's why it's a feast. It's not just a feast because you get to consume stuff. It first starts with the worship of the Most High by giving Him a sacrifice. So all 7 days of the Feast of Tabernacles, we were to give a sacrifice to the Most High. Read on.
From the top. 7 days ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High. On the 8th day shall be an holy convocation unto you.
All right, so the 8th day is also a holy convocation. It is a Sabbath day, a day of rest, where you all gather together as commanded and get busy in the work of the Most High. Continue on.
And ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High. It is a solemn assembly, and ye shall do no servile work therein.
All right, so this is the time frame of the Feast of Tabernacles. So you start on the 15th day, number 7 days, all the way up to the 21st day. Then on the 22nd day, which is the 8th day, you have another solemn assembly. So or a week where you have 2 double Sabbaths, basically. It starts off with the 7th day Sabbath and the Holy Convocation that starts off the first day. Then at the end of it, you have another 7-day Sabbath. Then the first day of the week is a Sabbath as well, a double Sabbath. Now, during this feast, there was something particular that went on. It wasn't just come together, give sacrifices, eat, go out in a tent. There was a purpose to this feast. There was a purpose to this week. There was a reason the Most High set it to this amount of time. Now, we're going to drop that, and if you'll grab Priest Azariah, 2 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 19, we're going to look at Solomon and what he did during this exact same feast that we're looking at, the Feast of Tabernacles. So we're not doing an in-depth history lesson on the Feast of Tabernacles, which we could do. Most High willing, we're going to save that for another point. Right now, we're trying to look at the main concept as to why we do the Feast of Tabernacles. What is the purpose of the Feast of Tabernacles? 2 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 19.
And Solomon made all the vessels that were for the house of Abba, the golden altar also, and the tables whereon the showbread was set.
So Solomon built the first grand physical temple on earth that we're commonly aware of. So David wanted to build this house to the Most High, but the Most High said, not you, it's going to be your son. So Solomon was raised up. He had no wars going on around him. He had the opportunity, and the Most High gave it to him to build this house. And he built this temple to the Most High. He built all the vessels that were to go into the house that Moses had not built. Read on.
Verse 20. Moreover, the candlesticks with their lamps, that they should burn after the manner before the oracle, pure gold.
All right, so we all know the house of wisdom. We should be keenly aware this is not a menorah. Solomon was constructing that rendition of the tree of life, as we saw in Exodus 25. And if you have not gotten a 2021 through 2022 calendrical Bible study guide, it's not too late. You can grab one. You still have half the year left, and you can go and get the understanding of this tree of life that our enemies have called it a candlestick and called it a menorah, but really they were talking about this tree of life that had the lamps illuminating it inside the sanctuary. So this is what Solomon built, and he was building he built the structure, and then he built all the vessels that went inside of this temple. Read on.
Verse 21. And the flowers, and the lamps, and the tongs made he of gold, and that perfect gold. And the snuffers, and the basins, and the spoons, and the censers of pure gold, and the entry of the house, the inner doors thereof for the most holy place, and the doors of the house of the temple were of gold.
All right, so we're picking it up essentially where Solomon completed the building of this house. So he built all the structures. He got the cedar wood and the fir wood for the sanctuary, overlaid it with gold, brought in all the golden vessels, then built the outer courts, all the porches and all the pillars and everything that went inside. All right, let's go over to the next chapter, 2 Chronicles chapter 5, and we'll start in the first verse. Priest Azariah.
Thus, all the work that Solomon made for the house of the Most High was finished. Solomon brought in all things that David his father had dedicated, the silver and the gold, and all the instruments put he among their treasures of the house of Abba. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief, the fathers of the children of Israel, unto Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Most High, out of the city of David, which is Zion.
All right, so once he finished building the temple and building all the other vessels, he took the Ark of the Covenant that Moses had built and carried it into the holy place, or had the priest carried it into the holy place. Read on.
Verse 3. Wherefore all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto the king in the feast, which is in the 7th month.
So this is when Solomon finished building the house. Now, it wasn't just random. It wasn't just he rolled the dice and it happened to be the 7th month. There was a reason he waited until the 7th month to complete the building of the house. Let's read on.
Verse 4. And all the elders of Israel came, and the Levites took up the ark. And they brought up the ark in the tabernacle of the congregation, and all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle. These did the priest and the Levites bring up. Also King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel that were assembled unto him before the ark. sacrificed sheep and oxen, which could not be told or numbered for multitude.
So this is what they did on Tabernacles. Once Solomon finished the house, now you only brought in that ark that one time. They need to take it out and bring it in, but they're going to start doing some other things as well with this tabernacle. But one thing that we see is they offered sacrifices. They took sheep and oxen and goats and lambs and sacrificed them without number because they were so plenteous. They couldn't even number how many sacrifices they gave on this feast in the 7th month. Let's read on.
Verse 7, and the priest brought in the ark of the covenant of the Most High unto his place, to the oracle of the house, into the most holy place, even under the wings of the cherubims. For the cherubims spread forth their wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubims covered the ark, and the staves thereof above.
So this was a grand building, a grand structure, where the priest went in and they went through all these chambers of gold until they got to the oracle, the holies of holies, a room overlaid with just pure gold. It was a golden palace unto the Most High, and they set in the Ark of the Covenant underneath these cherubims that were like 10 feet high. So, but this is not the point. This is just, good history for us to understand that the Most High built this house, allowed Solomon to build this house and brought the Ark of the Covenant in. That's not the point of what we're getting in this class, Most High willing. But let's continue on.
Verse 9, and they drew out the staves of the ark, that the ends of the staves were seen from the ark before the oracle, but they were not seen without. And there it is unto this day. There was nothing in the ark save the 2 tables which Moses put therein at Horeb, when the Most High made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt. And it came to pass, when the priests were come out of the holy place, for all priests that were present were sanctified, and did not then wait by course. Also the Levites, which were the singers, all of them of Asaph, of Heman, and Jeduthun, with their sons and their brethren, being arrayed in white linen, having cymbals and psalteries and harps, stood at the east end of the altar, and with them 120 priests, sounding with trumpets. It came even to pass, as the trumpeters and singers were as one, to make one sound to be heard in praising and thanking the Most High. And when they lifted up their voice with the trumpets and cymbals and instruments of music, and praised the Most High, saying, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. That then the house was filled with a cloud, even the house of the Most High, so that the priests could not stand to minister by reason of the cloud. For the glory of the Most High had filled the house of Abba.
So we see we're setting the scene essentially of what Solomon was doing at this time during this feast of the 7th month. He brought all the congregation of the children of Israel together. He had just completed this house. It's brand spanking new. And they brought in all these vessels into the sanctuary. And everybody, the priests, came together and praised the Most High and glorified his name. And they offered sacrifices to the Most High. And they offered so many that the smoke filled the house, and not even the priests could withstand that smoke. They're used to that. They're used to burning offerings to the Most High. But even they said, this is getting too much, because the power of the Most High was in there. They couldn't even take it. And this is what was going on in that holy house, in that tabernacle. Bear in mind, it didn't say they went out into tents. They're all in the tabernacle of the Most High, but that's a discussion for another day. Let's drop that. We're going to go to we're going to skip the 6th chapter and go to the 7th chapter of Priest Azariah. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, and we'll pick up in the first verse. Let's continue on to see how Solomon behaved and what he did on this feast of the 7th month, the Feast of Tabernacles. Yeah.
Now when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Most High filled the house.
So if this is what Solomon was doing during that feast, he prayed to the Most High, and the Most High sent forth fire down from heaven. Shouldn't we be seeking for the same exact thing? We shouldn't just be seeking for tents and canned sodas and lamb chops and everything. We should be seeking for greater than that. Let's read on.
Verse 2, and the priests could not enter into the house of the Most High because the glory of the Most High had filled the Most High's house. And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Most High upon the house, they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon the pavement and worshiped and praised the Most High, saying, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever.
So all the people saw the fire come down from heaven. The clouds opened up and a ball of fire came down and lit up the sacrifice. Solomon knew exactly what he was doing. He filleted it, cut up all these rams and bullocks. It was just there raw on the altar. And the fire came down and consumed it and burnt it up. The Most High received all of these burnt sacrifices on the Feast of Tabernacles. Let's continue on.
Verse 4, then the king and all the people offered sacrifices before the Most High. And King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. The king and all the people dedicated the house of Abba.
Ah, look at that. Key words here. On this feast, they offered a multitude of sacrifices. Now it gives us an exact number. 22,000 oxen, 120,000 sheep. Now that's a lot of sacrifices. That's almost unfathomable how many oxen were going. That was a real slaughterhouse, so to speak. And the fire came down, burnt up all these offerings, and the people dedicated the house of the Most High. This is what they did on Tabernacles. Now, you won't see this on some of the other feast days. You won't see this on Feast of Weeks. You'll see on this feast, Tabernacles, they dedicated this house of the Most High that they had just built. Once again, it wasn't just roll of the dice that Solomon chose this day to do this dedication. But let's read on.
Verse 6, and the priests waited on their offices, the Levites also with instruments of music of the Most High, which David the king had made to praise the Most High, because his mercy endureth forever. When David praised by their ministry, and the priests sounded trumpets before them, and all Israel stood. Moreover, Solomon hallowed the middle of the court.
So we see Solomon went, they were all in the porch of the tabernacle. For those who understand how the tabernacle was laid out, they're all in the porch, and they started to dedicate that altar that was there. Then Solomon, with the priest, went into the middle chamber, which is past the sanctuary, leading toward the holies of holies, and he hallowed that, or made it holy. He dedicated it to the work of the Most High. Read on.
Verse 7. Moreover, Solomon hallowed the middle of the court that was before the house of the Most High. For there he offered burnt offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, because the brazen altar which Solomon had made was not able to receive the burnt offerings and the meat offerings and the fat.
So they went and said, all right, we don't even have enough on the brazen altar is getting too full. We got to go into another altar and start sacrificing unto the Most High. And they took those offerings and went forward deeper into the house and started giving those sacrifices unto the Most High, because they were offering so much that, once again, as we mention all the time, that huge brazen altar, the size of a bus, double that, basically could not fit all these offerings that they were giving up. Let's read on.
Verse 8. Also at the same time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days.
So we see exactly what feast he's talking about. He said the feast of the 7th month earlier. He didn't clarify which one. It could have been memorial blowing of trumpets that they did this. Could have been Day of Atonement. But no, he's telling us at the same exact time as Solomon is dedicating the temple and hallowing the middle chamber, making it holy to the Most High, he is keeping a feast for 7 days. Read on.
Verse 8. Also at the same time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great congregation, from the entering into Hamath unto the river of Egypt.
All right, so the whole nation came together at this monumental event when this new house was built to the Most High. Now, they couldn't just go in and start giving whatever sacrifice. They couldn't go in and say, hey, I got some sins y'all want to take off me. You know, can you just give a peace offering for me? Or here's a free will offering. They had to do something first. They had to go and do the ceremonial ribbon cutting event, basically. They had to dedicate it, consecrate it to the Most High, and then put it in that continual motion. Let's read on.
Verse 9. And in the 8th day, they made a solemn assembly.
All right, so sounds just like Feast of Tabernacles. This indeed was Feast of Tabernacles. This was the 7th month. Solomon kept a feast for 7 days, and then came on the 8th day and had a solemn assembly. That's exactly what you do on Tabernacles. Read on.
For they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days.
So the dedication of the altar and the temple was a 7-day process. That wasn't just let me cut up a lamb and put it on the altar and boom, I'm good. You had to do this for 7 days. There was 7 days of purification or dedication for the tabernacle. And this is why it's a Feast of Tabernacles. You go into the tabernacle, into the house of the Most High, and dedicate it for 7 days. And then on the 8th day, you come and celebrate that dedication. Let's read on.
Verse 10, and on the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent the people away in their tents, glad and merry in heart, for the goodness that the Most High had showed unto David and to Solomon and to Israel his people.
All right, so we see on the 23rd day was when he sent them away. Showing you once again, this is clearly Feast of Tabernacles. If you do 15 days plus 7, that's the 21st day. Then add the first day or another day for the 8th day, that's the 22nd day. Now at the end of the 22nd day starts the 23rd day, that's when everybody can go home because the dedication has been finished. Solomon was clearly doing the Feast of Tabernacles, and he didn't just do it by going into a tent. Why did it not say Solomon pitched a tent and then went out and gave some sacrifice in the tent? They already were dwelling in a tent from the time of Egypt all the way to now. Now they have an actual house where they can go and serve the Most High. And they went and dedicated that house on the Feast of Tabernacles. This is the purpose of Tabernacles, is to dedicate the temple to the Most High. And they did this every year. They rededicated that temple and cleaned it out every year. Read on.
Verse 11, Thus Solomon finished the house of the Most High, and the king's house, and all that came into Solomon's heart to make in the house of the Most High, and his own house he prosperously effected.
All right, we can drop that, and if Priest Ross, you'll grab 1 Maccabees 1, and we'll start at the 37th verse. So we see this is what Solomon did during the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, unfortunately, us being so carnally minded and being so separated from our culture that we lose this. And we just see we dwell in booths or we dwell in tents, and we see what the fake Jews do, and we say, all right, it's Feast of Tabernacles, y'all. We're going to go on a hiking trip. We're going to go in the mountains. We're going to be in a tent for 7 days. And we do nothing. We don't do any sacrifice. We don't do any dedications. We don't do any consecrations. We don't do anything of that nature. When that was the purpose of Tabernacles. The purpose of the Feast of Tabernacles is not just to dwell in the tent or dwell in a tabernacle. You're in that tabernacle so you can dedicate it to the Most High. That is the purpose of the Feast of Tabernacles. You are making a cleansing for the temple, not just scrubbing the walls or anything, getting some soap and wiping down the blood from the altar. No, you're actually cleaning out the iniquity, cleaning out all the sin so that it can be a fit vessel for the use of the Most High. Now, we're going to jump forward into history, into the time of the Greeks with Judas Maccabeus. Unfortunately, we can't go through all the events that happened, but we've gone through it in several classes. Definitely a worthwhile read. We'll see that the Greeks came in and started defiling the second temple that they built. This is not the one that Solomon had built. Solomon's was destroyed. Then they came out in Persia and started building a whole another temple again. And they had to rededicate it as well. Now, you'll see here in Maccabees that the temple ended up being defiled. Let's pick that up in 1 Maccabees 1 and 37, priest.
Thus, they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it. Insomuch.
All right, so they shed blood all around in the sanctuary, and then they defiled it. These are the Greeks. They went and they killed many of the Israelites, shed their blood around the tabernacle, which was not to be done, and they end up defiling this house. Read on.
Insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them, whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers, and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her.
So Jerusalem, this city where the temple was, became a habitation for no longer the Israelites who were supposed to be there, who the Most High commissioned to be there, but this other nation, this nation that did not know the Most High, did not respect the Most High. They started setting up their idols inside this city and defiling and polluting this city. It was no longer hallowed or holy. It was no longer set apart. They had defiled it. Read on.
Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbath into reproach, her honor into contempt.
All right, so we see that the sanctuary laid in waste. It was no longer dedicated on this great, glorious event like what Solomon did. It was now a reproach. Her honor was in contempt. Read on.
As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased.
So just as there was a glorious event when Solomon had consecrated and dedicated it to the Most High, they offered so many sacrifices they couldn't even count them. The glory of the Most High filled the house. They said just like that was so great, this dishonor was even greater than that. Read on.
And her excellency was turned into mourning.
All right, jump down to the 54th verse.
Verse 54. Now the 15th day of the month Caslu.
So this month Caslu is the Babylonian name for the 9th month. Read on.
In the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side.
So they went through Jerusalem and all the other cities of Judah as well and built idol altars all around. They had essentially smeared mud all over this great golden city of the Most High. And they defiled it on this day. And then they went in also and set up the abomination of desolation, which is when they offered idol sacrifices on an idol altar, on the altar of the Most High. Remember, we saw that great brazen altar that the Most High set up through Solomon. They offered countless sacrifices on it. They went and set up a altar to Nike or Dionysus or whatever idol they wanted to worship. And they set up swine's flesh on it and sacrificed it to their idol. Let's read on.
And burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burnt them with fire.
So it wasn't just enough that they set up the abomination of desolation and set up idols on the altar of the Most High and defiled it. They also took all of our history, all of our books, and ripped them apart and burnt them. Let's read on.
And wheresoever was found with any the book of the testament, or if any consented to the law, the king's commandment was that they should be put to death.
So if anybody was found doing something that was righteous, something that was godly, that was not what the Greeks didn't want them to do, they were put to death. There was no mercy for them. This is how much they wanted to defile our land, because they saw what happened to us in history. They saw what happened to the Babylonians, or with us, with the Babylonians. When we defiled our own house, Most High sent forth the Babylonians to destroy us. So now they say, well, we can do the same thing, and the Most High will be angry with you and spank you up, and we will be the leaders over you. Let's do that. So they went and defiled this house to keep us oppressed and downtrodden. Let's read on.
Thus did they by their authority unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities. Now the 25th day of the month they did sacrifice unto the idol altar, which was upon the altar of Abba.
So they set it up on the 15th day, this idol altar, and then they waited for the 25th day of the 9th month to offer idol sacrifices unto their God on top of the altar of the Most High. This is how wicked they were and how evil they were toward us, how much sin was on them to cause them to do something so great and egregious unto the children of Israel. They were waiting for our particular days, which we've talked about in several other classes. They waited for this particular day to defile our temple. They defiled it. It was no longer fit for the use of the Most High. Now, fast forwarding a few more years in history, we see Judas Maccabeus being grieved by what happened. He stood up as a mighty man and went to war with these heathens who went and destroyed our temple and defiled it. Now, throughout several battles, they ended up reclaiming Jerusalem for the children of Israel. They end up pushing back the Greeks, sent them back with their tail behind their legs, and took over Jerusalem. And now they have this temple that's defiled. It's unfit. It's not fit for the use of the Most High. So what do they have to do? They have to dedicate it. They have to dedicate it again. Let's get that in 2 Maccabees. And we'll start in the 10th chapter and the first verse. Priest Rosh. 2 Maccabees chapter 10, verse 1. So once they reclaim Jerusalem, remove all the Greeks, remove all the idols that they set up, all the abominations, they still had to do something to the house to get it fit for the service of the Most High. It wasn't just they could come back in and give a sacrifice. You still got abominations in the house. You have to clean it out, make it fit. And look, once again, it's not just getting the dirt out. It's not sweeping the floors that they had to do. They had to tear down these abominations that were in there and set up the true altars. Let's read that, 2 Maccabees chapter 10, verse 1.
Now, Maccabeus and his company, the Most High guided them, recovered the temple and the city, but the altars, which the heathen had built in the open street, and also the chapels, they pulled down.
All right, so they took down all the idol altars that the heathens built. They were burning incense open in the streets. They tear all those altars down. And we see also they tore down chapels. We often look at chapels or chaplains like that's a good thing. That's a religious thing. That's a Christian thing. When in actuality, that was a Gentile thing. We don't have chapels. We have a tabernacle. We have a temple where we go and worship the Most High. The idol worshipers, the pagans, those who do not reverence the Most High have chapels. They have these houses where they worship their idols, and they have their chaplains, the ministers of these idol houses. These chapels are not for us. That's beside the point. Let's continue on.
And having cleansed the temple, they made another altar.
So they had to clean the temple on this day. Read on.
And striking stones, made another altar. Salakia. They took fire out of them and offered a sacrifice after 2 years and set forth incense and lights and showbread.
So they had to clean out all these abominations. Think of these abominations like it's your house. Your kids just went crazy and started drawing all over it, took mud in from the house, started just throwing mud patties at one another, splattered all over the windows and the walls and everything. You got to go in and clean that filth up. This is tantamount to the Most High's house, that these people just went in and defiled it utterly. They had to go and clean it up and then set up an altar. They couldn't even use the altar they had because it's tainted now. They had to chuck that one and go build another one and then strike these stones and light the fire. They went in and set forth the incense unto the Most High, set forth the lights on the candlesticks that illuminate the tree of life, that illuminate the golden tables, and set forth showbread unto the Most High, as we're required to do continually. Let's read on.
When that was done, they fell flat down and besought the Most High, that they might come no more into such troubles. But if they sin any more against him, that he himself would chasten them with the mercy, and that they might not be delivered unto the blasphemous and barbarous nations.
That's a deep statement in itself, too. Please, Most High, don't send us back to these other nations. Please. If we screw up, please. Be merciful and you chasten us, not these Gentiles that hate us. Read on.
Now, upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very same day it was cleansed again, even the 25th day of the same month, which is Caslu.
All right, so on the 25th day of the month, they had to, on the same day that the enemies came and defiled it, they had to clean it out and dedicate it. This was in resemblance to something else. This was not the same feast, and this is not a high holy day. It's a memorial day that we do keep. However, this was in likeness to another feast. And what feast was this in likeness to that they did on this 9th month, 25th day? Read on.
And they kept 8 days with gladness, and in the feast of the tabernacles.
As in the Feast of Tabernacles. So in the 9th month, 25th day, the day 2 years ago where the Greeks had defiled the temple, They came back and rededicated and cleaned it out, just like they were supposed to do on Tabernacles. They couldn't do Tabernacles. They couldn't do the 7th month, 15th day, but they were able to do the 9th month, 25th day. And so they kept it just like you keep Tabernacles. So looking at what Solomon did and looking what Judas Maccabeus did, this is what we should be doing on Tabernacles. We should be taking out all the filth, removing all the uncleanness from the tabernacle, and dedicating it for 7 days, plus that 8th day of gladness. Read on.
Remembering that not long afore they had held the Feast of Tabernacles, when, as they wandered in the mountains in dens like beasts.
So it ended up being that before then, on this 7th month, 10th day, they hadn't reclaimed Jerusalem yet. They had to be in the mountains and the dens. And it said they were like beasts. It didn't say they were doing righteousness when they set up their tents up in the mountains and the woods. It said they had to keep it like beasts, like animals, bathing in the waters, having no tabernacle, no building to dwell in like an animal. This was not something great that they were doing when they were dwelling in tents and booths. This was something that they did because they did not have a physical building. But now that they had it, they came back and dedicated it. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't do it. Our brothers in this time couldn't do it on the 7th month, 15th day. But when they reclaimed it, they made haste and did on the same day that the Gentiles defiled it, 9th month, 25th day. But they kept it like it was Tabernacles. They didn't just build a new altar and say that was it. They came and did everything Solomon did. Set up the altar, cleaned it, put all these plenty of sacrifices on it, and did it for 7 days. And on the 8th day, they initiated that dedication of the tabernacle. You can read on.
Therefore they bare branches, and fair boughs, and palms also, and sang psalms unto him that had given them good success in cleansing his place. They ordained also by a common statute and decree that every year those days should be kept.
All right. So this is the Feast of Dedication, not Hanukkah or not this 9th month, 25th day. The Feast of Dedication is Tabernacles when you dedicate the temple. This is the purpose of the Feast of Tabernacles. It's not just a feel-good day where you go on a camping trip. It is about dedicating the temple of the Most High. And this is what they did. It said in the 9th month, 25th day, they kept it as if it were Tabernacles because they missed Tabernacle. Not because that was some special day where you do Tabernacles. It's because they had missed it earlier. They're not going to wait a whole another year to consecrate that temple. They needed it now. They needed those oblations ASAP. There was no waiting for it. Now, we are missing the point. We're not looking at a dedication. We're not looking at sacrifice. We're not looking at oblations. We are completely missing the whole purpose and point of this feast day. And we need to also be pairing it with the Day of Atonement. We're looking at these as like isolated events. All of these come together and congeal as one body to clean out this temple. Priest Azariah, if you'll get Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29, we'll drop that there. And if you'll actually grab Priest Rosh, Ezekiel chapter 45, verse 21. Grab Leviticus 16:29 as we start looking at also the Day of Atonement, which we completed, all praise the Most High, doing 24 hours of straight oblations, cleaning out ourselves, cleaning out the tabernacle of all types of sin, all types of things that bring forth, that defile us, that bring forth iniquity amongst the children of Israel. This is what we did on the Day of Atonement. All praise the Most High that we were successful at a mission that Satan does not want us to do. But all praise the Most High that we accomplished it on the 7th month, 10th day, all in preparation for this feast day that we're coming on right now, the feast day that we have just started, Feast of Tabernacles. Let's get Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29.
And this shall be a statute forever unto you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, ye shall afflict your souls. Do no work at all, whether it be one of your own country, or a stranger that sojourneth among you.
All right, so on the 7th month, 10th day, you start to afflict your soul. You start to fast and mourn for all the iniquity that the children of Israel have engaged in. And you did that so you could do what it says in verse 30. Read on.
For on that day shall the priest make an atonement for you, to cleanse you.
To cleanse you, so you can be clean. This was about preparing for this great monumental feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. You had to get yourself prepared and right so you could clean out the temple, so you could dedicate it. You couldn't just be filthy trying to dedicate something to the Most High. You had to get all that sin out of you. You had to get all that iniquity out. Push it out first, and then you can start getting ready to dedicate the temple. Read on.
That ye may be clean from all your sins before the Most High.
So we had to be clean first. We had to get this intensive colon cleanse, so to speak, for our spirit, so we can go and dedicate the house. Without that, you can't come into a house filthy and think you're going to clean it up. If you got mud all on your boots, how are you going to clean up the mud that the kids threw around? You're not. You're tracking in more. So first, we had to clean ourselves on this Day of Atonement so we can come and start dedicating the house on Tabernacles. Read on.
Verse 31. It shall be a Sabbath of rest unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls by a statute forever. And the priest, whom he shall anoint, and whom he shall consecrate to minister in the priest's office in his father's stead, shall make the atonement, and shall put on the linen clothes, even the holy garments. And he shall make an atonement for the holy sanctuary.
So he didn't just make an atonement for the children of Israel. He had to clean out the sanctuary as well. And once again, this is not talking about he got a broomstick and started sweeping up the sanctuary. He had to clean out all the iniquity that the children of Israel brought into this holy place, make it fit so that they could dedicate it to the Most High. They had to clean the people and clean out the house by giving up these sin offerings and this expiation for the whole nation and give that quote-unquote scapegoat as we broke down, sending those sins back to Azazel from whence they come. This was what they had to do in preparation for the Feast of Tabernacles. It wasn't just, once again, you come in and you think you can just clean it out and you're straight. Clean yourself, then start dedicating the house of the Most High. Let's read on.
And he shall make an atonement for the tabernacle of the congregation and for the altar, and he shall make an atonement for the priest and for all the people of the congregation. And this shall be an everlasting statute unto you, to make an atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And he did as the Most High commanded Moses.
All right, so we see on the 7th month, 10th day, and as we went through in the class from last week, before Tabernacles, we showed that you actually came a little bit beforehand. There was a lot of preparation that the children of Israel had to do. We didn't just come and that was straight. You had to prepare for atonement, and you did atonement in preparation for this dedication during Tabernacles. So you came and prepared on the 7th day of the 7th month, got yourself right, got your mind right, you abstained from making yourself unclean, from defiling yourself, so that you could come and get these oblations. You didn't want anything stopping you or making you unfit to give up these oblations to clean you. This Day of Atonement was for you, was for us. As wicked as we are, as sin magnets that these flesh are, we had to come on this day and get rid of this sin, do a flush, basically, of our whole consciousness, getting iniquity out of us, sending it back to Azazel. Now, you did that preparation from the 7th day, the 8th day, then the 9th day. Then you came in on the 10th day and did that major oblation for the removal of iniquity from the children of Israel, from the holy place, from the altar, the sanctuary, everything that was going to be dedicated. And you shipped those sins, packaged them up in a FedEx box and shipped them right to Azazel, express packaging, and then you came in on the 15th day and started to dedicate these things that you had just cleaned, dedicating yourself, dedicating the tabernacle, the holy place. This is what Feast of Tabernacles is about. This is what the Feast of the 7th month are all about. Not just about having fun, not just about quote-unquote fasting, not eating hamburgers on Atonement, then coming and dwelling in the tent on Tabernacles. That's not what it was about. All these things work together to make us fit vessels to sacrifice unto the Most High during Tabernacles. Now, we'll drop that, and we'll get Ezekiel chapter 45, verse 21. Now, we're going to show also how we dedicate this temple in this new covenant. Now, we don't have a physical tabernacle, but we still must do this feast. That's not an excuse to not do tabernacles. As we went through in Ezra, he was lamenting all of the covenants that have been broken, that have fallen. And he said that when you have, for example, this cup that has this tea in it, if I drop the cup and it shatters and breaks, everything that's within that vessel is done for. I can't take that tea and salvage it again. It's gone. I got to get a whole new cup, make a whole new batch of tea. He said, with this covenant, though, it's not the same. We perish, the vessel perished, but the law that was in us, it's still in full effect. Imagine I drop this cup and the tea is just standing there in the cup shape. The cup shattered, the tea is there. It's still like somebody's got to drink me. Somebody's got to fulfill it. The law was still there. The covenant still needed somebody to come in and do it. That's us in this day. We died. We perished. The Most High shipped us away from Jerusalem. He sent us into this land of captivity and spread us abroad. He didn't say you can't do tabernacles, though. He didn't say you can't do Day of Atonement. He said you still need to do that. You better find a way, son. But he did. He gave us a new and living way to do these feasts, to do the commanded sacrifices that he gave to us, which we're going to get into in a second, Most High willing, to understand how these physical components that they did of offering sacrifices, cleaning out the house, dedicating it to the Most High, how that applies to us in these days. Before we do that, though, let's understand that this Feast of Tabernacles is also like another feast. Can anybody tell me which feast this Tabernacles is like? Saw a hand in the back. Young brother, you got an answer for that? Go ahead, Narayan, you got an answer? You raise your hand. Okay, you cheating. I heard the sister give you an answer, but I'll give you the credit for it. All right, Feast of Unleavened Bread, exactly. Let's show that. Let's prove that in the scriptures. Ezekiel 45, verse 21.
In the first month, in the 14th day of the month, ye shall have the Passover, a feast of 7 days. Unleavened bread shall be eaten.
So we're probably all pretty well acquainted with this, that in the first month, 14th day at evening, you sacrifice the Passover. Then you do another 7 days of unleavened bread. Read on.
And upon that day shall the prince prepare for himself and for all the people of the land a bullock for a sin offering. In 7 days of the feast he shall prepare a burnt offering to the Most High, 7 bullocks and 7 rams without blemish daily the 7 days, and a kid of the goats daily for a sin offering.
So every day they had to give these sin offerings for the people, for the congregation. The prince, who was the high priest, offered these sacrifices for the people on the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Another point that we're missing. Once again, our brothers and sisters end up being too carnal, and we think eating some machos is good. You're keeping the feast. But actually, you're not. You have to not only eat unleavened bread, and we're going to show why you ate unleavened bread, Most High willing, but you had to eat the unleavened bread of the sacrifices and also offer the sin offerings every single day, from day to day throughout the 7 days, cleaning out the people and the holy place and dedicating it to the Most High. Read on.
And he shall prepare a meat offering of an ephah for a bullock, and an ephah for a ram, and an hin of oil for an ephah. In the 7th month, in the 15th day of the month, shall he do the like in the feast of the 7 days, according to the sin offering, according to the burnt offering, and according to the meat offering, and according to the oil.
Read that again, verse 25.
In the 7th month.
All right, now he moved from the first month, and he jumps 6 months later to the 7th month. It says what?
In the 15th day.
In the 15th day of that month. And what's on the 15th day of the 7th month? Feast of Tabernacles. What do? Read on.
In the 15th day of the month shall he do the like in the feast of the 7 days.
Shall he do the like to the feast of the 7 days that he just mentioned? He just mentioned first month, 14th day evening, going into the 15th day. And you eat unleavened bread, you give sin offerings continually, you give all these offerings all throughout the days. And you do this on the 7th month as well. 7th month, 15th day is also a feast of unleavened bread. of giving up sacrifices for the children of Israel, just as you did in the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the summer that started with the Passover. The difference, though, on this one is that the great day is on the end, when in Feast of Unleavened Bread in the summer, in the first month, is at the beginning. But nonetheless, you do the exact same things that you do during Passover. If you don't eat unleavened bread during Passover, you don't eat it during Tabernacles. And that also means what you do in the 7th month, 15th day through 21st day, you replicate that same thing on the 1st month, 15th day through 21st day as well. So that means if you're dedicating the house on Tabernacles, 7th month, 15th day, you're doing that exact same thing 1st month, 15th day. And we're going to show that most high willing. If Priest Azaria, you'll grab 1 Ezra chapter 7. And we'll start in the first verse. 1 Ezra chapter 7 and 1. So we see that duality. And as we do many times, we've shown in all the calendar classes that you have a duality between the seasons. They are mirror images of one another. You can see that in what actually transpires by the seasons. You can actually feel it. You can feel how at the start of our year, it starts to get warmer until it gets to its hottest point, then it starts to decrease until you get to the equinox that starts that season. Then you have a time of decreasing. It's getting colder in the winter, and then you get to the winter solstice where it's at its lowest point. There's the least amount of daylight, and it's the coldest point of the year, which is reflecting that summer solstice that happened exactly 6 months before, where the sunlight is increasing. It's at its hottest point, and then from that winter solstice, you start to see an increase again. It starts to heat up until the equinox that starts the summer solstice. It starts the summer, the vernal equinox. We see a duality in the seasons, and we see a duality in the feast that we do as well. You start to see that the feast that you do in the 1st month, you do that exact same thing in the 7th month. So you had a 7th month 1st day, which we all know of, memorial blowing of trumpets. That means you do the exact same thing on the 1st month 1st day. You have a memorial blowing of trumpets, a high holy day where you come together on this new month and give sacrifice unto the Most High because of a change of a season. And then that means also on the 7th month 10th day, you had a Day of Atonement. That means there's going to be something in the 1st month 10th day that you do. And remember, we showed that the Day of Atonement was really a preparation for this Tabernacles. And then also you'll have a feast for 7 days with an 8th day attached to it. As you see a duality, as Ezekiel was showing us that duality, that these things mirror each other. They are mirror images of one another. All right, you got that 1 Ezra chapter 7? You can start in the 1st verse.
Then Sissons, the governor of Seleucia and Phoenice, and Sothrabuzanes, with their companions following the commandments of King Darius, did very carefully oversee the holy works, assisting the ancients of the Jews and governors of the temple. And so the holy works prospered when Agius and Zacharias, the prophets, prophesied. And they finished these things by the commandment of the Most High Abba of Israel, and with consent of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And thus was the holy house finished in the 23rd day of the month Adar.
All right, so we see this is the children of Israel coming out of the Babylonian captivity by the hands of the Persians, which the Most High ordained. He set the Persians to come in top of the Babylonians, and the Israelites went free. Or he allowed Daniel to have visions and to get in the good graces, so to speak, of the king of Persia, and then he sent them out. He allowed the children of Israel to be sent out into their own land so they could build the temple. And all these Persians, they oversaw the building, the construction of this temple. And it was finished, they finished it on the 23rd day of the month Adar, which in the Syrian tongue is the 12th month. All right. So you'll see, you can finish that up actually.
In the 6th year of Darius, king of the Persians. Verse 6. And the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and others that were of the captivity, they were added unto them, did according to the things written in the book of Moses.
All right, so we see on this day, they began to finish the temple on the at the end of the 12th month. And you'll see that within the Biblical Calendrical Study Guide. This is a day that we memorialize for when they finished the temple. So definitely get one of those calendrical study guides. This is a day that's coming up toward the end of our year. Let's read on. Well, before we read on, remember they built a new house. The old one was destroyed by the Babylonians. They razed it. It was all the way to the ground. There was nothing left where it stood. So now they built a whole new house. What do you have to do once you build a house to the Most High? You just go and sacrifice in it? You have to dedicate it. Now, what is it going to say the brother's going to do? Let's read on.
Verse 7. And to the dedication of the temple.
To the dedication of the temple. Now, when did they do this? Did they wait till Tabernacles? They waited another 6 months, 7 months almost, until Tabernacles to dedicate it? They just had this big grand house with all the altars just sitting idle, collecting dust until Tabernacles, right? Let's see when they did it. Read on.
And to the dedication of the temple of the Most High, they offered 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and 12 goats for the sin of all Israel, according to the number of the chief of the tribes of Israel.
So they're not just making stuff up as they go along. Even though they had to relearn some of what they lost in those 70 years of Babylon, the Spirit came through and showed them and guided them what to do. Now, as they built that house, they weren't just in the dark. They built it to spec to some degree, and they started giving the sacrifices as the Most High required. They offered the sacrifice for dedication, hundreds of bullocks, and the sin offerings for the children of Israel throughout this dedication, as we saw earlier, as we saw Ezekiel told them to do. Let's read on.
Verse 9. The priest also and the Levites stood arrayed in their vestments, according to their kindreds, in the service of the Most High Abba of Israel, according to the book of Moses, the porters at every gate. And the children of Israel that were of the captivity held the Passover.
What day do you hold the Passover? Read on.
The 14th day of the first month.
This is when they did that dedication for the temple. On the first month, 14th day. In that Babylonian or after the Babylonian captivity. We see Solomon did it 7th month, 15th day, 14th day evening. And now we see the brothers, Daniel and Ezra, coming out of the Persian captivity, setting up the temple, and they had just enough time to do that dedication on the first month, 14th day, showing you what Ezekiel said was exactly the case. That what you do in one feast, you do in the other. What you do in the summer, you do exactly in the winter. So you did a dedication in Tabernacles in the winter. You're also doing a dedication in the summer. You ate unleavened bread during Passover and unleavened bread in the summer. You went and did that exact same thing in the winter, in Feast of Tabernacles. This indeed, what we have started today, is indeed a feast of unleavened bread unto the Most High. Let's read on.
After that, the priests and the Levites were sanctified. Verse 11. They that were of the captivity were not all sanctified together, but the Levites were all sanctified together.
All right, so they, unfortunately, not everybody came out of the captivity. Not everybody was able to come to Jerusalem to partake in the sacrifice of this temple, but indeed the Levites were there giving up those oblations for the entire nation of Israel. We can drop it there. Actually, go ahead and read on. Priest Azariah. And then Priest Rosh, if you go Exodus chapter 12, and we'll start in the first verse. Go ahead and pick that up.
First Ezra 7, verse 12. And so they offered the Passover for all them of the captivity, and for their brethren, the priests, and for themselves.
All right, so we see, even though not everybody could come out of the captivity, the Persians set forth the priests and the nobles out, and they kept those of the countrymen. They kept them in their captivity to be their servants and to give them tribute. But he allowed the priests and everybody to go out and set up the temple and pray for the entire nation, and they did just that. They prayed for those who were still in the captivity, offering up oblations on their behalf. Read on.
Verse 13. And the children of Israel that came out of the captivity did eat, even all they that had separated themselves from the abominations, the people of the land, and sought the Most High. They kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days, making merry before the Most High.
All right, we can drop it there. We see they kept a feast of unleavened bread for 7 days. And as we saw the other time they built the tabernacle, they dedicated it for 7 days. They dedicated this house 7 days eating nothing but unleavened bread. That was a key instrumental part of the dedication, which most High willing we're going to get into. Before we do that, let's just bring home this point that we're showing about the duality, about how these two sides of the year mirror each other. They are an exact reflection of one another. Exodus chapter 12, and verse 1.
And the Most High spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year unto you.
Now remember, we said in the 7th month, 10th day, that day, Day of Atonement, is all about preparing for this feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. It's about getting you right, getting you clean, so you could be a partaker of this dedication. And we showed also through the Spirit that in the Feast of Unleavened Bread that we're so used to in the summer, that this also was a feast of dedication. That means there also must be a time of preparation, a time of getting yourself right, getting yourself clean, so you can come in and dedicate this house. Let's read on.
Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month.
In the 10th day of the first month, there's an event that you do. Read on.
They shall take to them every man a lamb.
They shall take a lamb and start preparing for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You didn't just come to Unleavened Bread on the 14th day at evening and say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready. Nah, you got to start getting prepared earlier. And just as Ezekiel said, you had to prepare for this on the 7th day. You did the 7th day, you did the Sabbath, and when that 8th day came around, you start sanctifying yourself. You didn't just say, Sabbath's over, I'm going to get dirty and get filthy. I'm going to do all the stuff I couldn't do on the Sabbath. Nah, you kept going, kept purifying yourself so you could come on the 10th day, get this atonement on the first month, 10th day, and get cleaned out so you can dedicate the temple in the 4th month or the first month, 14th day. Let's read on.
According to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats.
All right, so you take that lamb. It has to be without blemish, a fit vessel for the sacrifice of the Most High. And we, in this new covenant, must begin to do this exact same thing. Prepare ourselves, be without blemish, without spot, fit for the feast of the Most High. Let's continue on.
And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month.
All right, so you shall prepare for this Feast of Unleavened Bread, this Feast of Dedication in the summer on the first month, 10th day. You start preparing, getting yourself ready, getting yourself right so you could give up those sacrifices to the Most High. And you kept it up until the 14th day at evening where you began those sacrifices. All right, so we'll drop that right there. And Priest Azariah, if you'll grab Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1. So we see clearly that this is a Feast of Unleavened Bread, the feast we just started, Feast of Tabernacles. I'm sure, unfortunately, some of our brothers are out in their tents eating hamburgers with some crispy brioche buns on them with all the yeast in there, not observing the Feast of Unleavened Bread as we're supposed to. Doubly trespassing by, one, not being in the tabernacle, and two, by eating yeast on this Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, it's not too late. We just started here. If you are out there, if we can be humble enough to come to truth, come to the light, come on in. We're here. We're not going to kick anybody away unless you want to be kicked away. But come on in. Join us here, giving up the feast as it was required of us. So what we're going to do now is shift gears and show in this Feast of Unleavened Bread, how do we dedicate this temple? how do we observe a Feast of Unleavened Bread in this new covenant? Now, yes, you should physically abstain from eating yeast, eating leaven, but there's a little more to that. Let's start talking about that aspect, the leaven aspect of it, in Deuteronomy chapter 16, and we'll start in the first verse.
Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Most High thy Abba. For in the month of Abib, the Most High thy Abba brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Most High thy Abba of the flock and the herd in the place which the Most High shall choose to place his name there. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction.
All right, so now we see something critical here that a lot of us focus on, that we see the fake Jews focus on, because they don't really know our culture. They don't really know what we're about, what we're supposed to be doing. And then, unfortunately, us coming out of our captivity, trying to be awakened, not knowing, not receiving the Spirit yet, try to find somebody to give us some direction. And who do we turn to? The fake Jews. And we say, what do y'all do? Oh, y'all eat unleavened bread because it's the bread of affliction? All right, that's why we're going to do it too, because it's the bread of affliction. We're remembering Egypt. Let's read on.
For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life.
All right, now it is true that the children of Israel went out of Egypt in haste. They went out in the middle of the night. That is true. But that's not why you eat unleavened bread. The unleavened bread is not a bread of just, it's not about mourning and fasting. This is actually a feast. Why are you eating an afflicted bread during a feast to the Most High? We'll show you why you're actually supposed to eat unleavened bread. Because the Most High ordained this before they actually came out of Egypt. We actually see in the book of Adam and Eve that Adam was doing the feast of Passover and unleavened bread. But that's beside the point. Let's look at some of the components of the unleavened bread. Priest Ross, if you get Leviticus chapter 2 and start in the first verse, let's examine this unleavened bread. Why is it that on this day the Most High said, eat unleavened bread, don't eat any leaven? He did send the children of Israel out of haste. He did not give them the chance to leaven their bread. So that was the doing of the Most High. That wasn't just because they had to go out in haste and the Most High said, oh, snap, y'all didn't get to leaven your bread. All right, we're going to do this for the rest of our lives. That's not how the Most High worked. The Most High is a mastermind. He planned all this out from the beginning. And he told them, you guys are not going to eat unleavened bread on this day. And he didn't even give them the opportunity to make leaven in their breads, to mess up on this Passover. Let's examine this unleavened bread and show why we are not to eat it on this day. Let's get that Leviticus chapter 2 and start in the first verse.
And when any will offer a meat offering unto the Most High, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil upon it, and put frankincense thereon.
All right, so if anyone will offer a meat offering, that is not fried chicken, crispy chicken nuggets that you put in the deep fry and offer to the Most High. That's not what it is. You see those memes on Facebook with like, I know we're the children of Israel.
Right.
We offer the meat offering. They got a picture of fried chicken, Kentucky's fried chicken. This is not what it is. This is fine flour that they put oil on and frankincense thereon, prepared it as bread to the Most High. Let's read on.
Verse 2. And he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests. He shall take thereout his handful of the flour thereof, and of the oil thereof, with all the frankincense thereof. And the priest shall burn the memorial of it upon the altar, to be an offering made by fire of a sweet savor to the Most High.
He didn't take some already cooked fried chicken and then burn it on the altar. He took some fine flour, and you burnt the memorial on the altar, and they took the rest for the meat offering continually before the Most High. Let's jump down to the 10th verse. It's going to tell us some of the particulars of this meat offering, how we are to prepare it before the Most High. And remember, this is not particular to Passover, unleavened bread. This is a continual thing. This is a constant thing. Anytime they gave a sacrifice and burnt it on the altar, they had to prepare the meat offering in this particular way. Leviticus chapter 2, verse 10.
And that which is left of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is the most holy of the offerings of the Most High made by fire. No meat offering which ye shall bring unto the Most High shall be made with leaven.
Now we're starting to see some of the components. Remember, this is not Passover. He's saying on a daily basis, whenever you are offering a meat offering unto the Most High, you will never put leaven in it. The day you do that is the day your names are Nadab and Abihu. The Most High will strike you down, consume you in fire, and put you to death because you offered the sacrifice the way he said you shall not do it. You were never to offer leaven when you burnt an offering by fire unto the Most High. What else were you not to offer?
For ye shall burn no leaven, nor any honey.
So you didn't burn any leaven or you didn't burn any honey, which is really talking about sugar, things that actually feed this yeast or this bacteria. So these oblations were actually anti-yeast or antibacteria. Read on.
Nor any honey in any offering of the Most High made by fire.
All right, so you offered no yeast, no leaven on the altar of the Most High. Now, this leaven, just for edification's sake, is not talking about leavening agents that we see on ingredients today. This is not talking about baking soda. Baking soda is fine. This is talking about yeast and yeast-related things, bacteria, things that just grow and multiply on their own. That's what it's talking about, not just baking soda or anything like that. That's perfectly fine. Let's jump down to the 13th verse.
And every oblation of thy meat offering shalt thou season with salt.
All right, so every oblation, every meat offering that you gave to the Most High, you had to put salt on it. You could not offer an oblation, a meat offering, and just have flour, water, oil, and that's it. Everyone had to have salt in it. And that salt serves a purpose. It doesn't just add a savory taste to it. It doesn't just season it. Salt is actually antibacterial, anti-leaven, anti-yeast. It does not allow yeast to grow. It does not allow any other bacteria to actually grow on whatever you put it on. You look at examples of when people salted their meat. It allowed that meat that would have otherwise spoiled in a few days to last the whole 6-month trip across the ocean because they put the salt on it, and bacteria could not survive on that meat because of all the salt. Read on.
Neither shalt thou suffer the salt of the covenant of thy Abba to be lacking from thy meat offering. With all thine offerings thou shalt offer salt.
All right, so every meat offering, it had to offer salt. Now, remember, this is the offerings that you burnt on the altar. Go up to the 12th verse, Priest Rosh. So we see that on a daily basis, anytime you took a meat offering of fine flour, made it into bread, and put it on the altar and had it burned on the altar for the Most High, there could be absolutely no leaven in it. You had to season with salt to ensure no leaven floated in the air and landed on it and started to breed and grow. You had to put that salt on it, make sure it died, make sure there's absolutely no yeast in it. However, there's a caveat. I won't say a caveat, but there's another component to this law that the Most High is bringing forth. Read the 12th verse, Priest Rosh.
As for the oblation of the first fruits, they shall offer them unto the Most High. They shall not be burnt on the altar for a sweet savor.
So he gave us a hint here. He said there is a meat offering, though, that you do not burn on the altar. You take it and you offer it, and the people eat it. But you don't burn it. Now, why? Why would you not burn this? Priest Azariah, if you get Leviticus chapter 23, and we'll start in the 10th verse, and if Priest Rosh, you grab Leviticus 7:15. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 10. We see that there's a meat offering that you did not burn on the altar. And why? Why did you not do that? We're going to see right here in Leviticus chapter 23, and we'll start in the 10th verse.
Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye be come to the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest.
All right, so this is the Feast of Weeks, 50 days. On the first day is a holy convocation. On the 50 days, a holy convocation. Ye shall come on this first day and bring forth your harvest, your first fruits, as it said in Leviticus 2 and 12. Let's read on.
Verse 11. Ye shall wave the sheaf before the Most High to be accepted for you. On the morrow, after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Ye shall offer that day when ye wave the sheaf and he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto the Most High. And the meat offering thereof shall be 2 tenth deals of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto the Most High for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, the 4th part of an hin. And ye shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the selfsame day that ye have brought an offering unto your Abba. It shall be a statute forever throughout all your generations and all your dwellings.
All right, so we see that on this high holy day, you brought in your meat offering, your first fruits. You didn't eat any of it. You didn't prepare any of it for yourself until you offered a sacrifice unto the Most High. Let's read on.
Verse 15. And ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete.
All right, so this is not a class on the Feast of Weeks. We've done several lessons on it. You can go and get some understanding of those feasts as you want. Go back and look at our Feast of Weeks classes. However, right now we're focusing on the Feast of Tabernacles. But right now we show this is a Feast of Unleavened Bread. We're showing why you don't eat unleavened bread and how we keep it in these days. So we see on the 50th day you came and bring a new meat offering. You brought a new set of first fruits because you had new crop grow and you brought it in on that 50th day. Now, how did you offer that meat offering, that first fruits unto the Most High? Read on.
Verse 16. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days. Ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Most High. Ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2 tenth deals. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baken with leaven.
So we see he said with these 2 tenth deals of flour that you brought in on this high holy day, these ones you actually baked with leaven. You actually baked this crop, this meat offering with leaven. And they are what?
They are the first fruits unto the Most High.
So we see, just as what it said in Leviticus 2, you did not burn these on the altar. There was leaven in them. The people made them with leaven on this day. So we see this difference between the unleavened bread and the leavened bread that you offer for the sacrifices. There were 2 distinctly different oblations. I don't say distinctly different, but they had a partition between them. There was a separation at this time. The priest had their sacrifices that they took part in, and the congregation had theirs. We're going to show Leviticus 7 and 15, Priest Rosh, that this is what the congregation offered. This is what they ate. They gave the memorial. The priest took it and burned it on the altar. And then the congregation went and baked their food with leaven, baked their meat offering with leaven. Let's show that in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 15.
And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day that is offered. He shall not leave any of it until the morning.
All right, so we see that the peace offering, this is not even particularly the Passover. This is talking about a general peace offering. The law of the peace offering is you cannot leave any of it until the morning. Why is that? Because bacteria floats in the air and will start to grow on it, and you have leaven on your sacrifice. And you could not eat that thing, that peace offering, with that leaven in it. Read on.
But if the sacrifice of his offering be a vow or a voluntary offering,
Or if it's a Thanksgiving offering as well, which the congregation would take part in. Read on.
it shall be eaten the same day that he offereth his sacrifice. On the morrow also, the remainder of it shall be eaten.
So with this Thanksgiving offering, you can actually have leaven in your sacrifice because it wasn't burnt on the altar of the Most High. So we see that you can eat unleavened bread or leavened bread with your Thanksgiving offering, with your vow offering, or with your free will offerings. And you could actually take the meat, the flesh that you burnt, and let it sit out that day. You could eat it the next day. Now, you didn't have to burn it the 3rd day. You didn't want anybody getting sick. But you could, let it sit out. You could eat it that day. You could eat it the next day. On the 3rd day, you had to burn it in fire, as the scriptures say. But we see that leaven was tolerable to the Most High when you weren't burning it on his altar. If the priest took their portion for the peace offering, burnt it on the altar, consumed it, they had to eat it without leavened bread. No leaven in the bread, had to be seasoned with salt. And the meat, the flesh of the sacrifice, I should say, could not sit for any longer than a day. It was just like the Passover. You had to eat it that night or that day. After that, you burnt the whole thing. Now, the congregation's offering was a little different. They could have a little leaven in their oblation. And that shows that in this Feast of Unleavened Bread, this one that we're in Tabernacles and the one in the summer, that's why they did not eat leaven. Everybody was that day eating like priest, eating like king, so to speak. They ate that unleavened bread of the sacrifices. They weren't just doing their own thing. Everybody was partaking in that dedication of the temple. Everybody was eating what the Most High ate. He didn't want any leaven. He didn't want any yeast. He wanted everything sprinkled with salt, and he burned it on the altar. That's what you're eating this day. Don't bring any leaven into this house on this day while we dedicate it. You're actually muddying up the water, so to speak. You're actually, bringing forth a little bit of things you should not be bringing in this house, and we're trying to clean it out. Now, sometimes you do that. On other days, yeah, you do that. But during this feast, when you're dedicating the house, it's all about the Most High. You're feasting with the Most High. You're eating exactly what he's eating. If we're burning unleavened bread unto him, that's what you're eating, unleavened bread, because it's his dedication to his house. That is the purpose of us not eating leavened bread this day, or for these days, I should say. That is the purpose. Eat like the priest, eat like the Most High on these days. Not just about the Most High wants you to be afflicted. It has nothing to do, I don't say nothing to do with that, but basically that's a small matter. It has all to do with the dedication of that house, and we eat like the priest, and we eat like the Most High. All right, let's drop that. Let's switch gears. If you'll grab Matthew chapter 16, Priest Azariah, as we try to come to the closing end of this class. And if you'll grab Luke 11, starting verse 37, Priest Rosh. Now, we see that you don't offer leavened bread, which are sacrifices unto the Most High during this day. You don't eat leaven. You eat what the priest sacrificed. You eat what the Most High is receiving as well. We're all feasting as one together on this day. On these days, we're dedicating the house, the tabernacle. Now, we know that we don't have a standing tabernacle. And we know that our covenant, the law in this covenant, is spiritual. It's no longer physical. That doesn't mean, hold your horse. That doesn't mean don't go out and just start buying buns and bread and everything. We still physically observe this day as well. Don't eat leavened bread. Abstain from leaven. Eat it physically. But there's a more important matter as well. Just as we went through with the Day of Atonement, people look at the physical aspect of a fast and they don't eat food, they don't drink water for a day. That's all cool if you want to do that. But if you put the basis and the most importance on that physical component, you've already lost. You've still lost. There is a greater component to this Feast of Unleavened Bread. Let's get that Matthew chapter 16, verse 5, Priest Azariah.
And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread.
All right, so they all left from where they were, went on a journey on a boat, and the disciples forgot to gather their bread. Read on.
Verse 6, Then Yahushua said unto them, Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, It is because we have taken no bread.
And the Messiah came and said, I need y'all to be wary of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and Herod, all right? And he left. And they're like, dang, Christ's coming hard on us because we forgot this bread. I thought it was just a small thing. Why is he coming down so hard on us about that? Read on.
Verse 8, Which when Yahushua perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith.
Oh, ye of little faith. Don't you remember all the miracles I can do? I can have bread fall from the sky. You think I'm concerned that y'all didn't bring bread? Read on.
Why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do ye not understand, neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets ye took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets ye took up?
So he said, you don't remember when we were having to feed the thousands, the multitude, and we had 1 loaf and some fish, and I broke them, and then we had baskets upon baskets of bread? You think I can't just bring bread from heaven? You don't trust in the Most High? You don't have enough evidence in the Most High to believe in him, to be faithful unto him? Read on.
Verse 11. How is it that ye do not understand that I spake it not to you concerning bread, that ye should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the
He
Sadducees?
said, I'm not concerned about you can't take bread from the Pharisees or the Sadducees. That's not what I'm concerned about. And then they started to understand, I'm getting it, Christ. I'm understanding. All right, be patient with me. Read on.
Verse 12. Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees.
So it was the doctrine. It was what they were spitting, what they were teaching, what they were doing that the Messiah, I should say, said, be wary of. Be wary of the leaven of the Pharisees. He didn't care about physical bread. Physical bread means nothing to this spiritual man. He's talking about their doctrine. Let's look at some of their doctrine, what they were doing in Luke chapter 11, verse 37. Priest Rosh.
And as he spake, a certain Pharisee besought him to dine with him. And he went in and sat down to meat. And when the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed before dinner.
All right, so the Messiah came and started dining with this Pharisee. And he said, hey, look at this dirty dude, man. Dude didn't even wash his hands before he sat down and ate. It's all dirty. Oh, man. This is supposed to be the Messiah? This is supposed to be the son of the Most High? He can't even wash his hands? What's wrong with this dude? Read on.
And the Most High, and the Lord said unto him, now do ye Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward part is full of ravening and wickedness.
He said, you guys are so caught up in cleaning the outward body. Y'all like to take long baths and long showers and get all your ointments and look good on the outside. But the inside is full of wickedness and ravenous. You guys are full of iniquity, are full of sin. Sin is enthralled in the inwards of these Pharisees and these Sadducees. This is what the Messiah was warning them about when he said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisee. They're the sins that are upon them that caused them to spit forth these wicked doctrines. We can go and read on and see some of the wickedness that they were doing. Read on.
Ye fools, did not he that made that which is without make that which is all with, like you. Ye fools, did not he that made that which is without make that which is within also?
So he said, you guys are so caught up in the flesh. Did not the Most High make the things that were inside as well? Did not make your soul, your spirit to be cleaned as well? And y'all are so focused on the little speck of dirt that I might have on my hands rather than the wickedness, the sin that's in you. Read on.
But rather give alms of such things as ye have, and behold, all things are clean unto you. But woe unto you, Pharisees, for ye tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs.
So on a side note, we see here in the New Testament, quote unquote, the Messiah is talking about tithes. He didn't say money. He didn't say you tithe a bunch of gold and you tithe a bunch of silver. He said you tithe mint, rue, and herbs, showing you what the true tithes are. But that's a whole nother class. Let's read on.
And pass over judgment and the love of Abba.
So they give all these tithes and all these blessings, so to speak. They give all this greatness in the flesh, but they pass over judgment. They misjudge. They accuse people who should not be accused because they don't like them. They accuse people that they think are wrong when they themselves are wicked. They do not execute the judgment of the Most High and the love of the Most High, which you know is keeping his commandments. They don't even truly keep the commandments of the Most High, keep the feast days, but they want to act all good and act all pompous like there's something righteous and godly by bringing forth all these tithes, truckloads of material, but in the inside, they are full of iniquity and full of sin. For time's sake, we'll jump down to verse 53.
And he said these things unto them. The scribes and the Pharisees began to urge him vehemently and to provoke him to speak of many things.
And when the Messiah said all these things, he said several things, talked about how they killed the prophets, their forefathers, allowed the blood of the prophets to be on their hands. That was the type of iniquity, the type of sin that was on these people. That was on our own brethren, unfortunately, that they allowed sin to seep into them, to bring forth so much leaven that they killed their own brothers, killed Zacharias, the same ones that killed Abel, same spirit that was on Cain. The Messiah is telling them, be wary of this spirit, this leaven that was even on Cain. And so much so that it offended them, it offended these brothers, and they started trying to provoke the Messiah. So they could do what? Verse 54.
Laying wait for him and seeking to catch something out of his mouth that they might accuse him.
That was the spirit that was on these brothers, a spirit of accusations. Just like Satan himself, always seeking to accuse. They were like, I'm waiting for you to slip up. I'm going to keep urging you and get you to slip up and say something that you shouldn't so we can accuse you and charge you and put you in prison and kill you. That was the spirit that was on these Pharisees and these Sadducees, that spirit of sin. And that was what the Messiah was warning us about. Priest Azariah, if you'll grab 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 1, and Priest Rosh, if you grab 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and 16. So we see that the Messiah, when he said, be wary of the leaven of the Pharisees, he wasn't talking about bread. He wasn't talking about you got to eat unleavened bread. He was talking about you have to stay away from the iniquity, the sin that's on these people. Stay away from the doctrine that sin is causing them to spit forth. Stay away from the abominations that sin is causing them to do. Let's pick it up with Paul reiterating a similar sentiment. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and for context sake, we'll start in the first verse.
It is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles.
So this is at the point where they start taking the term fornication and using it interchangeably with, quote-unquote, cheating on the Most High and also doing some physical sexual wickedness. Read on.
That one should have his father's wife.
So this is what these Gentiles were doing, the church of Corinth. They were so off that one was going to his father's wife. His father wouldn't go on a trip, and he's like, stepmom, what's going on? Let's read on.
Verse 2, and ye are puffed up and have not rather mourned.
So even when they were doing this wickedness, they were puffed up. They would do this high abomination and then go to their fellow brother, the fellow man, be like, guess what I did last night? Let me tell you about what happened. Brothers, be mournful that you did this abomination, all right? Don't be puffed up, as Paul is telling them. Read on.
That he that hath done this deed might be taken away from among you.
He said, those who are puffed up, who did this and have no shame, are puffed up and proud and like using this as a badge of honor. We're going to take you away from us. Take you away from this church and send you over to Satan. Read on.
Verse 3, for I verily, as absent in body, but present in spirit, have judged already, as though I were present, concerning him that hath so done this deed, in the name of our Lord Yahushua Christ, ye are gathered together in my spirit, power of our Lord Yahushua Christ, to deliver such an one unto Satan, for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of the Messiah Yahushua.
So he said, those brothers doing this high abomination and being proud about it, being puffed up and glorifying this, all right, brother, we're going to have to cut you off from the church. You're no longer welcome. Sorry to say, you can go and dwell with Satan like you want to. And we know your flesh is going to get destroyed. You're going to die. The Most High is going to bring some curses on you. We're going to keep giving up oblations and praying for your soul that when you die, hopefully you'll be a partaker of the resurrection that's to come. Read on.
Verse 6, your glorying is not good.
Your glorifying in this abomination is not good, and here's why.
Know ye that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump.
Don't you know that a little leaven or a little bit of yeast or a little bit of bacteria leavens the whole lump? You can't sprinkle yeast on one side of the dough and think it's not going to rise out through all of the dough. You can't have, as the saying goes in the world, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. If you got one apple with some leaven on it, with some yeast, and it's going bad, you think you're going to leave it around the rest of the apples and it's going to be okay? Nah, that one apple is going to affect the next, and it's going to affect the next, and the next, and the next, and the next, until the whole batch is done for. We had an issue with that earlier. We had some watermelons. One went bad. Then the next one went bad. Then the whole bunch went bad. We're trying to save them for the feast, but there's leaven on them now. We had to toss those things out because one had leaven on it. And that's what Paul is saying. A little bit of sin causes the whole congregation, the whole body to be filled with sin. You can't have one brother who's like, yeah, this is what I like to do on the weekends. I like to go to the club and do X, Y, and Z, and I'm glorifying him. Every Sabbath, he's coming talking about what he did so-called Friday night, and we don't just tolerate that. Brother, you either got to change or you got to get out of here because you're going to affect the next brother. A next brother, young and weak, is going to be like, you know what? Let me come with you next Friday, all right? We're gonna go to the club and go get the thing on. No, brother. You're infecting the congregation, bringing forth that leaven, bringing forth that yeast into the congregation. Let's read on.
Verse 7. Purge out therefore the old leaven.
Purge out this old leaven, this old iniquity that's been with us from the beginning of times, and be what?
That ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened.
As you are unleavened. So in this feast, this is what we are to do in this new covenant. Now, yes, we still say abstain from the physical yeast, the physical leaven, but also with that, be a new lump spiritually. Remove that spiritual leaven. Remove that yeast that's within us and become a new lump, a new unleavened lump. Meaning spiritually, remove that sin, remove that iniquity out of us. Read on.
For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us.
So Christ, being our Passover, was, quote-unquote, unleavened. He was without sin, without iniquity. He was a perfect, unleavened sacrifice for us who are full of leaven. Read on.
Verse 8. Therefore, let us keep the feast.
Now, let us keep this feast, this day, for the 7 days. And how do we keep it?
Not with the old leaven.
Not with that leaven that we had before. Not with all that sin, all that iniquity that was upon us, hating our brother, want to do some wickedness, want to go out to the club on the Sabbath or whatever it may be. Whatever iniquity or trial is plaguing us. Read on.
Neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness.
This is that leaven of malice, of doing evil toward one another. That sin that makes you hate your brother, and wickedness. Doing all types of wickedness. This is that leaven that Paul is talking about. Read on.
But with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth.
This is the unleavened bread. Being sincere in the truth of the Most High. Being sincere with the Messiah and giving up these spiritual oblations. This is how we are to keep the feast. Now, once again, we being men of two components, or people of two components, a physical and a spiritual, we must do both. We do the physical, yes. But we know that's not the essence of this all. We also do the spiritual aspect. Don't eat physical leaven, put away the wonder bread for these 7 days, but also put away the iniquity, put away malice, put away wickedness, put away all types of wickedness for these 7 days because the temple is supposed to be dedicated. You can't bring forth iniquity into the temple. You got that 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16? Now, in this new covenant, we have to dedicate this temple again. We must keep this dedication going every single year. Now, we don't have a physical temple. We don't have a physical altar. We don't have anything set up in Jerusalem where we go and give sacrifices. Where is this temple that we must dedicate? Let's get that. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, 16.
Know ye not that ye are the temple of Abba?
You are the temple of the Most High. We are all the temple of the Most High. Read on.
And that the Spirit of Abba dwelleth in you.
Remember what happened in Solomon's day when they offered hundreds of thousands of sacrifices and they couldn't even count all of them. It said the smoke filled the house and they could not stay in there because the glory of the Most High was there. It was frightening to stay in that house. They had to get out. So we are to be the same. We're to offer hundreds of thousands, incalculable sacrifices within us by this spiritual covenant, in this new covenant by the Messiah, and have the Most High dwell with us. But in this feast, we can't do that, bringing forth leaven. We have to purge out the leaven so we can dedicate our temple, the temple that's within us. What happens if we don't do this? Read on.
If any man defile the temple, of Abba.
Yes, and if any man defiles the temple, now this defiling the temple is not what we've been taught. We're taught this in church. If you're smoking cigarettes, this is what the Most High gonna do. If you drinking alcohol, you alcoholic, no, that's not what it is. Now those things are wrong. Those things are off. This is not about having a healthy diet. This is not about I eat celery stalks and I run all the time. No, that's not what it's about. This is about what we were just talking about, that you are bringing leaven in this feast. This is how you defile the temple. Imagine in Solomon's day, you have everybody in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, eating unleavened bread, worshiping the Most High, eating like the Most High, and somebody's coming in munching on some Wonder Bread. What's up, guys? What's going on? What are they going to do? You're defiling the temple. Take that man out, and we're going to destroy him. We're going to take a big rock and throw it at his head, and we're going to teach him a lesson. If he recovers, he'll learn not to do that again, but I doubt he will. Let's read on.
If any man defile the temple of Abba, him shall Abba destroy.
Him shall the Most High destroy. Once again, this is not saying if you like to eat chocolates and you're eating some chocolates, you're not eating healthy, the Most High is going to destroy you. That's not what it's saying. If you, during this Feast of Unleavened Bread, are bringing forth leaven, bringing forth malice, and bringing forth wickedness, and bringing forth abominations, and bringing forth sin, he didn't take that Day of Atonement seriously, getting that sin out, and afterward, you just let sin come back in, then the Most High will destroy you. It's a vessel unfit. It's not fit for his use. And what's he going to do? What's a tree that doesn't produce forth fruit? This is good for firewood. I'm going to chop that thing down and burn it in my furnace. There's no benefit to it other than that. Read on.
For the temple of the Most High is holy, which temple ye are.
Just as Solomon hallowed or made holy that middle chamber and the sanctuary, we are to do the same thing. We're supposed to be holy to the Most High, dedicated to his service. And this is that feast where we dedicate that temple. We are dedicating ourselves to the worship of the Most High. And we do that by getting in these oblations all throughout these days, all throughout these 7 days, and come together on a holy convocation on the 8th day, and also throughout these days, having no leaven within us. As the scriptures say, no leaven should be found within your habitations. In your tabernacle, make sure there's no leaven there. Make sure you're getting rid of sin. Now, we had a big, thorough cleaning on the Day of Atonement. Now it's time to come in, getting some of the creeks and crevices. Every day we offer the sin offerings for the entire congregation. Go into the little crevices in your mind, the crevices of your temple, and it might be underneath a carpet you never moved before. You might find a bunch of spiders and bugs. Go ahead and sweep that thing out, clean it out, spray some bleach, get it perfectly clean. Get all the leaven out of these small little crevices for these 7 days, having our temple dedicated to the Most High. Lastly, Priest Azariah, you got something you want to add? Okay, if you'll grab Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, as we start to conclude this intro class, Most High willing. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. Remember, we talked about the meat offerings. And there was a meat offering you could offer with leaven inside the temple. And there's also another one, or majority of them actually, you could not offer with leaven. The sin offering, the trespass offering, there was no leaven offered in those. The peace offering itself that the priests offered, that they burned on the altar, there was no leaven offered with those. All of them had to also be sprinkled with salt. So as we're removing the leaven, we're removing sin, there's also a spiritual component to this salt. Let's get that, Matthew chapter 5, verse 13.
Ye are the salt of the earth.
You are the salt of the earth. This doesn't mean you got flavor and you got style. You got your nice little shoes on. You play jazz music. That's not what it's about. It has nothing to do with it. And once again, this is our brethren, unfortunately, not having the spirit, not understanding our culture. Remember what the salt was for. They sprinkled it on every meat offering to ensure there was absolutely zero leaven surviving on that meat offering. So now with this understanding that leaven is sin, and that we have sin offerings, we have trespass offerings, that's what our purpose is. We go forth throughout the earth and exterminate sin. You drop some salt on look at a slug. It's a bigger example. You can't really see it if it's on a micro scale, but drop some salt on a snail. What does that thing do? Shrivel up and start to die, right? That's what we're doing to sin. With these oblations being that salt of the earth, causing it to shrivel up, perish, and die. That's what we are to do. Not to be stylish, not to be clean cut and everything. We are to remove sin from off the earth. If we're not doing that, then what?
But if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted?
So if we're not keeping this feast of unleavened bread, we're not exterminating leaven, we're not being the true purpose of this salt, it's lost its savor, what are you going to do with it? If you got tasteless salt, are you going to put it all in your food and stuff? You're going to have mounds of salt in there. It's going to be a mountain of salt. You're not going to taste it. It has no purpose. Read on.
It is thenceforth good for nothing.
It is good for absolutely nothing. And what do you do with it?
But to be cast out.
Cast that thing in the trash can. Toss it away, toss it in the trash, dump that thing out. If I taste some salt and it has no salt or it has no saltiness, it has no benefit to it, it's not killing bacteria, it's not aiding me in any way, what am I going to do? I'm going to keep that thing in my pantry? Nah, that thing is going straight in the trash. In fact, I'm going back to Walmart being like, return this thing. Now I'm going to Whole Foods to get some real salt. Read on.
And to be trodden under foot of men.
To be trodden under foot of men. That is the purpose of salt without its savor. Now, we in this feast, this is our calling to understand we have a feast of unleavened bread where we keep unleavened bread for 7 days. And we must be the salt of the earth. We must go forth and eradicate sin, eradicate iniquity, removing that true leaven, which is sin. Now, sin likes to just grow if you don't check it. If you put bacteria in a Peachtree dish, it just starts to grow, starts to bubble up. You leave that thing out for a year, you got that Peachtree dish overfilled with bacteria and grime and leaven. Now, we must be those people who come and put leaven or sin in check. We come in with the salt, all those antibacterial things that kill out all of this sin. We are to be the salt of the earth. And during this feast, we are to be a completely new lump, unleavened to the Most High, dedicated to Him, as our forefathers did during the Feast of Tabernacles. All right, we're going to shut down the class there for the intro class. Most High, we're going to make way for the main class. I think we're going to open up for Q&A after the main class as well, so stick in with us for those who have questions. I know some people do. Most High willing, we'll be starting up Day of Atonement, not Day of Atonement, but Feast of Tabernacles today. We're going to come in the day watch, in the evening watch of this day watch, start giving up the oblations from the 9th hour up to the 12th hour. This is a perfect time for those to get consecrated, to get dedicated to the Most High, become a fit vessel for His service, and enter in and give up those oblations to the Most High. So join us throughout these 7 days. Most High willing, we'll be here from, I don't know the Gregorian dates. That's how detached I'm glad to be. But from the 7th month, 15th day, which is today, all the way up to the 7th month, 23rd day, Most High willing, we'll be here. So join us, giving up those oblations to the Most High, engaging in the Feast of Tabernacles as required. Peace and blessings to you all. Shalom.
He who hath ears to hear, listen carefully as we speak virtue, reaching the world through the efforts of the priests, repairers of the breach, restorers of the paths, rebuilding the tents of David. Our home is found at last at the tabernacle of congregation, where we baptize and anoint our nation, performing oblations upon the brazen altar, walking in the ways of the appointed Savior with poise, escaping the noise from Satan and his poisonous nature. Without fail, he accuses the brethren, using his weapons of collusion, and then sin comes upon us. And we deserve it, to be honest. We were cursed, cause we honored and were worshipping the gods of this world and was living lawless. At first to the written law, without purpose and little knowledge, serving our wicked conscience. Thus, righteous judgment was handed down from the courts of the Most High. A sobering moment, but let's be holy and pure while we endure and ensure life comes forth. Let us hold tight, secure in our roles as we strive, adorned with our robes white and clean. It might seem like the loneliest road, but we stride in hope as the Most High reveals His ideals. In And so we exercise patience as well as love, dwelling safe in the seventh covenant, graciously set as sustenance. Let us exemplify faith through hell and suffering, praying to quell the punishment, waiting on heaven's government to be established, as it was in the Garden of Eden, when Abba had breathed life into creation, and our forefather received the living word. No more are we called prisoners, we live and learn, and study to be approved as the sons of Yahweh, who were lovingly given rules to better build and preserve truth. The bricks surrounding the kingdom are the 7 pillars of virtue. This is a house of wisdom. Shalom.